All right. Hi everybody, my name is Ari. I am Keystone Fly Girl, and I'm here to tell you guys about my favorite leech pattern and then also show you how to tie it. So what I like to call this is really my Simi Seal dubbing leech. The main ingredients that we're going to be using today are available on the Fish USA website. I like these voodoo jigs. If I'm in a pickle and I need to tie a bunch of these, they're super handy because we already have the weight built into the hook. So instead of having to buy a hook and then a bead separately, it's very handy because it's all connected. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get this in the vise just so we can take a peek at it. The other ingredients that we're going to be using are some Semperfli Sub Seal. It's basically very similar to the Arizona Simi Seal dubbing, but the fibers are a little bit longer on it, so you'll see that I take a little bit more time when I'm making my dubbing loop with it. So let's get started. I already have my hook in my vise. Big thing, especially if you're using a rotary vise, make sure that you have the hook in here appropriately. So what I mean by that is that it's nice and even, so I can work right across the hook shank. It's not in here like at a weird angle. So the thread I'm using is a UTC 70 denier thread. If you want to go with a heavier thread, because we are using these larger jig heads, you can absolutely do that. I like to have an understated look to my flies, so that's why I like to use 70 denier thread for this fly in particular. So I have my thread seated on the hook. I'm going to go all the way back to about the bend of the hook, and then I'm going to start to work it back forward. I want a little bit of a thread base so that when I tie in the tail, it doesn't slide around the shank of this hook. All right, so I've worked my thread back to basically the barb on this jig hook, okay? So what I'm gonna do now is get the material together for making the tail. As to tail lengths, I do believe it's really personal preference with these. When I'm making a tail for my flies, I usually like to use the shank of the hook as a gauge for length. So what I'm going to do is match up this seal dub to about the length of the shank of this hook, okay? Within all of this, when we're fly tying, for most of us this is really just going to be for enjoyment. It's more or less adults, arts and crafts. So I'm giving you the basic recipe, but go ahead and alter it as you see fit. All right, so I'm going to pull a little bit of the material out and try to make it as even as I can. It's obviously not going to be perfect, and the beauty of this fly is that it is a little bit messy. Okay, it's the impression of a minnow, more or less. When I go to seat this in, I'm going to be using pinch wraps. So I'm pinching this thread between my thumb and my pointer finger, and then once I have it seated, now I'm actually going to be tugging on it. One more pinch wrap, excuse me, and good. So now I'm going to cinch it down a little bit further. I'm going to tie in front of this thread, and then I'm going to trim this. There's a lot of seal dubbing substitutes. Again, this is Semperfli's seal dub. So we've got a nice tail on this. The next step is going to be building the body. I like to use what's called a dubbing loop for this. So I'm going to grab my thread. I'm going to wrap around the hook shank a couple times, and you've almost kind of tied off this loop basically. I'm now going to walk the thread up to the jig head, pull my bobbin rest around, utilize that. Okay, so I have this loop. What I'm going to do is get a little bit of low tack swax on the one side of it, and this is just going to help my dub to sit there. You don't need to be liberal with the wax for two reasons. It's very sticky, and then it's got a little bit of a a yellowish tint to it. If you're a little overzealous with that swax, you will see that, especially when this fly gets wet. So I'm gonna use all of the dubbing I have in front of me. This is what I trimmed off from making the tail. I'm gonna kind of try to stack it in my hands a little bit, and then I'm gonna place it into the loop. Especially making the dubbing loops, okay? And I'm sure that we'll be speeding up the video a little bit as well. Take your time. This is what's gonna be making the body of your fly. So if you rush this, you're really rushing your fly, and you're doing yourself a disservice. One thing with dubbing, less is more. You don't wanna be using way too much, because you can always add more. So now I'm just stacking in my loop. And I've stacked almost to the bottom now. All right, and then I've got my hook. I'm gonna hook this into the bottom of my dubbing loop. I'm gonna spin it counterclockwise. Actually, I'm going clockwise. Whichever way you spin it, keep it the same way, okay? I've met fly tyers that wrap their thread in a different direction than I do. Again, it's basically adults arts and crafts that we're doing here, so if it's working for you and you like how it works, keep doing it. There's a lot of fly tying groups that you can go visit when they're having classes. Most fly tying classes are actually going to be in the winter time, but there's a lot of online tools available, like this video, okay? What I'm doing now is trying to get my dubbing a little bit more uniform, okay? I'm picking it out a little bit, making sure that I have a nice tight dubbing loop, and I'm now ready to start wrapping. So I have a rotary vise, which is why I'm able to twist this bad boy around. I think it's super handy for streamers in particular, but if you don't have a rotary vise, all we would be doing is just going around like this, okay? As I'm wrapping this up the hook shank, I'm gonna be careful that these long fibers don't catch in a manner that I don't like, so I'm gonna be constantly brushing them back. Slowly working up, still brushing back. All right, and then now we're gonna tie this bad boy off. A couple times in front, a couple times behind. Be very careful when you trim so you don't trim off the thread that's in the bobbin. Okay, so I'm gonna pull these fibers back while I go around just a few more times. All right, and then with some of the dubbing that I pulled off, I'm gonna actually make a little bit of a dubbing noodle, just so that I know that we have a good collar on this. Awesome, looking good. So I'm gonna be getting ready for the whip finish. So I have my tool, I'm holding on to it and my thread securely. And then now that I have my little upside down triangle, I'm actually ready to whip finish it. I am a fan of a double whip finish. If time is of the essence or you don't feel that it's necessary, that's okay. I like to have flies for more than a few fish, and I find that adding the extra whip finish on it is helpful. If you're not too handy with the whip finish tool, you can always just go with a little dollop of Sally hard as nails. I'm a big fan of this. I do not use the brush out of it. What I will do is I will open it up, and then what I do is I grab my little bodkin okay? And then I'm just gonna grab a little tiny dot of it, and I'm gonna apply it directly to my thread wraps. I do it this way because for those of you that have used this product, you know that if you use too much of it, you'll actually see that there's a dark hardness where you applied it, and I don't like that look. So I'm very sparing with the Sally's Hard as Nails. And this, my friends, is a nice little jig dubbing leech. I'm gonna get it a little bit messier, and I am gonna trim up just a little bit of it, so we'll get it all out. Good, looking good. If I really need to tease it out, that's when I'm gonna grab my tool for that. And all right, looking good. So we'll do a little trimming now. I like to keep the fibers a little bit longer near the hook, but up here, up front, I do trim these down just a little bit. All right, and this is a completed Simi Seal dubbing leech. I like these flies all the time, but I know it sounds kind of crazy, but low clear water, this fly is pretty deadly. I don't know if it's just that it's the impression of a minnow or what, but see how it's not super duper bulky on the hook shank? I think that that's a big component of it, especially here in Steelhead Alley. There's a lot of overdressed flies that people are fishing. They look great to us, but there's just too much material on the hook, and there's something about it that the fish can tell. So I urge you that when you tie this fly, be sparse. Use thinner thread than you might otherwise use, and don't be afraid to give some Hard as Nails a try after you've whip finished. Thank you.